Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Honor to have Mr. Siva Kumar today. It's an omnipresent person, face, knowledge. I don't think there is any domain in India, particularly in India, in agriculture, which is not taken advice, mentorship from Mr. Siva Kumar. Today's discussion on Ray Talks, Agri-vision here from the leaders, is a topic seems to be very generic, but very focused. The topic is next generation agriculture. Very difficult to define, explain, or talk about. But I think I have Mr. Siva Kumar with me where I feel very comfortable. As we are all aware, friends, thanks to your love and support, today this is our 12th webinar, 12th discussion, a conversation through Ray Talks, which is brought to you by Ray Consulting, our firm. You know that Ray Consulting strengthens clients' businesses in agriculture and allied sector. We have expertise and serves clients in entire agri value chain. We create vision, mission, and purpose for the businesses. The audience, now or later, if you have any plans to grow your business, transform your business, please get in touch with us, Ray Consulting. Ray Consulting, me as a founder, I am from agribusiness experience and background of 30 years, worked with companies like Rallies, Keminova, which is now FMC, PI Industries, and I was heading marketing in Nagarjuna Group. I'm a BS Agriculture, MS Agriculture, and business manager from XLRI Junction. Before I introduce Mr. Siva Kumar, let me speak why this today's topic, next generation agriculture. Sometime back, Sir and I, we were talking on the changing scenario with the COVID. Then Sir came out with a point. He said, Raj, it's not just about COVID or this is an opportunity or given excuse as a post-COVID or COVID-19. But if you really look at it, the entire agricultural chain is actually transforming. It is moving from agrarian to the consumer base. It's like any FMCG product. Means what? We have evolving consumer needs, consumer at urban level, semi-urban, even at a rural level, who is looking for quality, health, nutrition, and variety with the convenience to feed, to accept. But the farming has to meet this consumer needs, farming has to have remunerative crops like vegetables, fruits, nutritious crops. We have gone back to the millets, pulses, and derived products from milk and meat. To gain from this opportunity, our farmers have to need and access to new knowledge in crop management and efficient linkages to both input and output markets. Indian farmers are as diverse as our country. They are large and small. Some of them are landowning, most of them are tenants. They are men and women. They are of all ages, old and young. Some of them take a lot of big risks. Some of them are risk-averse and so on. While we have to nurture large and medium farmers to be globally competitive, in India, we cannot afford to ignore, but have to protect the small and marginal farmers in their subsistence farming. To enable every farmer to prosper, they need to raise their incomes substantially. Very important, sustainability is an issue. So, an entire new sector in the form of agri services is kicking off, which will make India secured not just in food, but very critical nutrition. Now, the moving point is not only just feed the hungry stomachs or the new end generation, but also see that how nutritious the food is. So, to discuss this and beyond, I have with me, I call Doyen of Indian agriculture, father for many of the concepts and ideation, each of us, 20 years. It sounds as if it started yesterday, because every day something or the other innovative is happening there. So, Mr. Siva Kumar, so please, you're welcome to this discussion. People are looking forward to hear from you. I know.
Thank you, Raj.
Almost you are a person who's in a great, I won't say demand, because you are the person who gives knowledge and information to everybody at every stage. So I know almost 2 or 3 webinars you are addressing, besides your internal meetings with so much challenges of meeting these COVID situations. I know all of you know about Mr. Siva Kumar, but I like when I talk about him. Mr. Siva Kumar is a group head of Agri and IT businesses at ITC. He is the chairman of Technico Agri Sciences Limited and vice chairman of ITC Infotech India Limited and its subsidiaries in the UK and the USA. We all know ITC's trailblazing Age of All initiative was developed, mentored, and executed under Mr. Siva Kumar's leadership under Agribusiness Division of ITC. I just mentioned Each of All has just finished 20 years of innovation and execution. Mr. Siva Kumar is a topper of class of 1983 at Institute of Rural Management, Anand, that is famously known as IRMA. Before joining ITC in 1989, Mr. Siva Kumar had worked for a farmers cooperative for 6 years. Mr. Siva Kumar is a member on the Advisory Council to the Ministry of Rural Development at Government of India on the National Rural Livelihood Mission. He is on the Commodity Derivatives Advisory Committee of SEBI, that is Securities and Exchange Board of India. He is on the Board of Governors of Institute of Rural Management, Anand. And among many other organizations, just to name a few, Mr. Siva Kumar has served on the boards of India's National Bank of Agriculture and Rural Development, NABARD. He is served Indo-US Knowledge Initiative on Agriculture and the Private Sector Committee of the Consultative Group of International Agricultural Research, that is CGIAR. Most of you who may not be familiar with CGIAR, simple way I can say is, in Hyderabad we have ICRISAT, in Manila we have IRRI. So they all are part of CGIAR. And sir is also on the Agenda Council on Social Innovation of World Economic Forum. This is for the world, but Mr. Siva Kumar has been a great inspiration, advisor and guide for me at Ray Consulting at a personal capacity. Mr. Siva Kumar has involved himself and guided, advised 2 of the blockbuster conferences. For the first time they were held in India. One was on Agribusiness Summit and Awards, which was held last April. This year we postponed because of the pandemic. And the next one, for the first time that was held in the country, was on Digital Ag India Conference. So again, Mr. Siva Kumar really came out with brilliant ideas to make this conference successful, in the sense lot of inputs were given and people had so many things to take away from those ideation. Sir, you are welcome again to this thing. Now, before I proceed, it's mandatory on my part to thank our sponsors. We have Sri Bioaesthetics as one of our sponsors, which is headed by Dr. K.R. Reddy, one of the most important techno-commercial persons in the world who is working and promoting on agribiomes. agri microorganisms. Tree Bioaesthetics is based out of Hyderabad and research-oriented organization. And we have Seedworks as our other sponsor who has supported for this webinar series. Something to share, only last evening, Venkat Ram Vasantwada, the managing director of Seedworks, had shared a message with me telling that Seedworks is awarded as a 24th company out of 800 plus companies in India whose Seedworks is a great place to work. And this is not the first time Seedworks has received this award. I have a message from Venkat Ram. I would like to share it with you. Just give me a minute. Sorry, just a minute.
Good day and greetings from Seedworks. My name is Vasantwada Venkatram. I work as CEO for Seedworks International Private Limited, based out of Hyderabad, India. Seedworks' vision is to provide superior seed solutions by harnessing technologies and innovation to create value for all stakeholders in a sustainable manner. At Seedworks, we are committed to enhance the livelihood of the farming community by closely working with public, private, and civil society to meet the national goal of doubling up the farmers' income. The introduction of Agriculture 4.0 has paved the way for a new space in agriculture, which we now call as the agri-tech sector. Companies use the latest and emerging technologies in the agri sector as an engine for sustainable growth. At Seedworks, being a life science and technology company, we are focusing on digitization and innovation as levers to meet the social, environmental, and the economic growth of the seed ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you. Sir, so if you're ready, shall we start conversation?
Yeah.
I know it's unusual that in the beginning itself hands are raised. That means a lot of people have questions for you. We request the audience post your questions either in Q&A or chat box, and surely we'll allow some of you to speak to Mr. Siva Kumar directly after we finish our conversation, so that you will come to know probably what you have in mind already answered by Mr. Siva Kumar. Otherwise, you are always welcome to put the questions to Sir. Sir, there's a very famous idiom, farm to fork. I think today's subject, I would put it as fork to farm. it's a typical consumerism industry where you, for example, coming from ITC, which is diverse from one single entity to multiple verticals, very strongly work on consumer behavior, and you work backwards, seeing that what consumer wants, and you give a product. So looks like agriculture also is getting into that mode. So to make this farm to fork to farm, if India has to get into what I call as the golden decade of agriculture, next 10 years, I would like to know from you how to make it happen. How do we create demand-driven farm production instead of just producing something what farmer wants? This keeping in mind the changing patterns of food consumption. So what do you feel about this?
Yeah, Raj, I think this is a good description in some sense of next gen agriculture that you also titled this conversation on. You know, folk to farm is not just a play of words to my mind. It actually is a fundamental shift in how agriculture was conducted in our country. And of course, it is not just about consumerism, so to say, but the outcome of this kind of approach is going to be more remunerative farming, and it certainly is going to be more knowledge-based and hopefully lower drudgery to the farmers and better dignity of labor. And in the process, also is more ecologically sensitive and climate resilient. So although we are starting and talking about consumer, the outcomes are far more comprehensive than just fulfilling consumer needs. It just so happens that fulfilling a consumer need is a starting trigger for all of these better outcomes to be set in motion. And that's how the next generation is very different from the last generation. And to that degree, I think your opening question of folk to farm as opposed to the conventional paradigm of farm to fork, which itself is in case one kind of a paradigm shift. We always saw in some kind of a silo saying that no, research independent of production, which is independent of consumption. And the whole idea of farm to fork was to look at that as a chain. But this reversal is what really will make it far more sustainable, both as a value driver, also from the climate perspective. Yeah, how to make it happen was your question. It certainly is easier said than done. It actually is putting a large ship which is moving in one direction to suddenly reverse its direction. So that changing course is the nature of shift, because Indian farmers were used to producing crops based on the last season's prices and demand. That if something fetched a good price last season for one crop, let me plant more of it. Barring, of course, crops which are supported by the minimum support price by the government. Other than those, by the time you actually harvest, suddenly you see that demand is far less for this product, or almost everybody did the same thing, and therefore supply is far in excess. So therefore, how do you ensure that it is the demand which is driving? And demand is not only in terms of crops. As part of your introductory remarks, you also talked about many other features, whether it is more variety versus just the grains and vegetable oils and pulses that were part of our conventional diet. There is a lot more vegetables and fruits and milk and meat, all of that. So that variety has also expanded. So therefore, you need to produce more of this. Then you talked about quality. Then you also talked about convenience. Convenience at the time of buying, at the time of usage. So all this means some level of processing and packaging gets involved. There is food safety and concerns about what is contained in my food in terms of things like pesticide residues and is this organically produced and some of those kinds of concerns. All of this basically means that there has to be a traceability in how something got produced and is what is produced actually is made available to me. The concerns on health and wellness and nourishment. So I think these are a whole host of consumer expectations from food as we are transforming from otherwise a relatively low income nation to at least sizable segments of consumers to higher incomes, better awareness, and therefore these expectations are there. So how do you ensure that all of these demand signals actually reach the farmer and then ensure that the production system becomes responsive to these kind of needs is this folk to farm paradigm shift. And not only should the farmer's production system respond to this, but rest of the value chain also has to get aligned in terms of, I just mentioned about fruits and vegetables and other perishable products. Obviously, product-specific, climate-controlled storage and handling systems must also come along in this. Processing, I already talked about. Now, where they should get produced could also get triggered by this kind of a shift. Probably we need more vegetable producing clusters around urban agglomerations in the vicinity so that you have some of the fresh produce reaching, and some of them could be through climate controlled agriculture. Now we are seeing many of them coming up in outside of many cities. Probably more horticulture clusters also coming up nearer the port cities. So instead of selling the produce, as was the paradigm for many years, now producing the buy is the basic shift, and every element along the value chain must get aligned with this, and that's what can then contribute to all the outcomes that I talked about. Because if you're just producing and waiting to sell at that point of time based on last season's demand, then nobody can guarantee what price one might fetch. And that is the starting point of unremunerative farming. The other point obviously is in terms of if you're not cultivating, which is in a climate resilient manner, you also have the risk of production itself, because agriculture is largely weather dependent. And even though I'm talking about certain climate controlled agriculture, that will still be a smaller portion. A very large part is going to be open to sky agriculture, which basically means you have that kind of risk also. So I think in all of this new paradigm, all these need to get managed, and that's what we would call as a folk to farm agriculture, and that's what can qualify to be next gen agriculture.
I'll take you through my 3-generation experience. I grew up in a town. My mother purchased wheat, cleaned, sometimes soaked, dried, sent it to the flour mill, got the atta and made rotis and chapatis for us. Then Anita came in my life. She continued for some time what my mother did, but then she found, when not that you are here, I'm saying her favorite atta is Ashirwad. And when I asked why, she said it's closest to what Amma used to make. Now, when my son is in the US, when we are away, my daughter would prefer rotis which are ready-made. Just put in a microwave and eat it. Now, this is very important, especially from Indian context or Indian point of view. We are not just looking at the convenience, but we are also looking at the taste, the nutrition, and many other factors in this. So, what are the things that go to make this happen? Like especially from ITC, each opal started as something, helping farmers. Now it is a complete end-to-end chain, from grain to not just atta but roti, and now a lot of ready-to-eat foods. So how will this agri value chain, or how will the farmer comes into this entire value chain?
Yeah, since you picked up Ashirwad Atta and gave that example, I think in addition to SeedWorks plugin, I have a great unpaid commercial through Ashirwad Atta. So let me make that opportunity to explain as to what does it mean to deliver a product like that, to make it a number one for all these years, and in the process make the chain inclusive and get the farmer to earn more. And that's what ultimately the folk to farm is all about. And very similar kind of examples can be there for every other product line as well. When we in the 90s, when McKinsey had famously produced a report called FIDA, the Food and Agriculture Integrated Development Action. It talked about several categories with growth opportunities in the processed and packaged food. And among many things, atta was also one of them, saying that the Indian packaged atta consumption was so minuscule compared to our total atta consumption, exactly like the story you narrated as to how your mother used to make rotis out of wheat that is bought and then got it milled in a neighborhood chakki. So that was the standard practice. And even a neighboring Pakistan had a very high market share of the packaged atta. Okay. So we saw this as an interesting situation. And then our own consumer research around the country told us that the atta requirement of the households was very varied across the country. The consumer in Chennai, what you were looking for in atta was very different from a consumer in Ahmedabad or in Guwahati in terms of the color, the texture, and the dough keeping quality, the water absorption capacity, and so on. There are more than 20 different parameters. Not exactly all of them articulated by the consumer as such, but what one was preferring was visible. And if you actually have to deliver that, you need to understand the wheat which is coming from the farms. Indian farmer also produced a whole range of wheats in the farms, depending on their own local agroclimatic conditions. Many different varieties of wheat were there. There were as many as 120 different varieties of wheat when we put together and looked at what was all happening at the back end. And across the country, we saw, if you have to reasonably cluster the different habits of cuisine and consequently different expectations out of atta, anybody can classify in their own manner, but we classified there are 7 different variants across the country. The challenge was in meeting these 120 varieties of wheat with these 7 different consumer expectations. But the supply chain that was operating in between was a traditional farm-to-fork supply chain, a production-driven supply chain. And when the wheat came to mandis or went to FCI, all of that got aggregated and all these different varieties got commingled into one lot, because at the mandi, the adatia who's buying this wheat has to mix good, bad and ugly to make it a fair average quality and take it to the mill. Or the FCI had only a fair average quality as part of the government buying system. A better wheat had no incentive, and worse wheat obviously was not getting accepted, and therefore the entire farming system in places where the FCI buying was large moved towards maximizing yield of a fair average quality, and the interesting variants which were providing different taste were missing from the production system as we evolved. So these demand signals as to what is in demand, what is likely to be more in demand, had to go back to the farmers. If there is a particular variety, of course, varieties like Sharbati were known and that was moving into the market even in the wheat. But many other varieties like the Raj and Lokwan and even other unknown varieties which had similar kind of chemical properties were all not reaching the market in their real value. So I think that is what we have brought to the market in terms of consistently making available particular varieties of wheat packaged under Ashirwad and made it available to different parts of the country as their preference was. And each opal it enabled by buying directly from the farmers, and the identity of the different varieties of wheat and different grades of wheat within each variety was preserved throughout the supply chain. So what was more in demand, farmers started getting a higher price, and what is not in demand will not fetch similar kind of price, which consequently led to a demand-driven kind of a production. And I think that is the kind of an approach. So what is in demand, how do you transfer the signal back and create an appropriate supply chain? This obviously meant the storage systems, which are very different. The entire ERP which is built has to make it visible as to what variety is stored in which warehouse when you are accumulating. So if you have to buy in lots of 2 tons from each farmer, as opposed to buying a 10-ton aggregated truck from a mandi or a 100-ton lot from a trader, you needed to create your entire storage and handling systems also which are aligned with this. So I think that kind of a systemic change is what has enabled this transformation. And so I think every other category is something very similar, whether it was be natural juices that one were bringing to the market and get the fruits aligned in a similar manner. So it's all a similar kind of a approach that is required.
Okay. So I think I understood the entire thing, what goes into Ashirwad to eat the tasty and soft rotis, what we make at home and beyond. So, I wanted to understand from you, what are the farmer-centric interventions or solutions that serve the purpose of farmers across the country with so much diversity, which you explained just now, and climate change? Adding to that, what is the role of corporates like us and the government? Because, for example, recently, government has come out with a huge package, especially for agriculture. So many changes in the policies and other things. How corporates can take advantage of this, or how agencies can facilitate this to happen so that farmer gets benefited?
See, heterogeneity, you described very well in terms of how heterogeneous our farmers are. And all this demand signals will have to reach the farmer, and the farmer will have to respond. So how do you make something farmer-centric despite this level of heterogeneity, and also do it in that level of scale with as many as 140 million farming families that we have around the country? I think digital technologies is a key solution theme that I would speak about. And you also obviously talked about e-Chopal already. And that's with a similar kind of a thought process. And with the further advent of digital in the more recent times, there are obviously many other players who are also participating in this market using technology. So if you have to look at what needs to reach the farmer, because it's only technology which can personalize to the level of heterogeneity that we have and yet do it on scale. I think that is the reason why I'm bringing technology in terms of digital here. I already talked about the need for demand signals reaching farmer, and it has to be on a relevant kind of a demand signal that should come to the farmer in terms of from that particular region, what are the kind of crops which are in demand, what are the potential prices that at the time of harvest one can fetch. The second piece is very similarly, the production side information should also reach in terms of weather forecasts, which have implications on farming operations. It is also the crop management advisory based on the specific farming conditions that are there. The crop should get monitored based on which this advisory gets fine-tuned throughout the crop cycle. And the third piece is really in terms of a coordinated availability of inputs. That because quite often the decision on which crop to plant and what level of investment that one would make, farmer would wait until such time weather is visible. Is it going to be raining more or getting delayed, or more rain or less rain, and so on. And therefore, coordinated availability of inputs, notwithstanding these last minute decisions, must be another feature. So what can integrate all these three things is the digital platforms. And in that context, if you were to say in terms of what is it that role that corporates will play or government has to play in making this available, I think in terms of not only putting together this kind of digital solution, but making it available at the farm level in terms of handholding the individual farmers can happen in a couple of ways. So one is the way in which the FPOs or farmer collectives in any other form, so that the power of scale comes to the small in engaging with these digital networks, and FPO can create that kind of an intermediation and make this solution available to the farmer. The other is making use of the village level entrepreneurs like we have done with the e-Chopal Sanchalaks, who then facilitate access to the farmers, not only the content of the various portal and these services, but also facilitating inputs, facilitating credit, facilitating sale of insurance, any of those kind of products which are there. And as may be required, the equipment hiring services and all of that through Uberization of farm equipment services, that all of these are the things that handholding is required at a local level. So either by FPOs or by the village level entrepreneurs. And that entire organization has to be done by whoever is participating in the chain. So be it corporates or be it larger cooperatives themselves. Or in some cases, I have seen many not-for-profits also engage. If they could be doing it. The role of government is in two ways. So one is you did talk about the recent reforms. The conventional market yard system reduced the relationship between the farmer and rest of the value chain to transactions of the day. And in which case all these other paraphernalia and infrastructure that we talked about to keep the farmers informed with all these services would not happen when the relationship between the farmer and the buyers is just transactional. Now, these laws that have just been announced open up that and create this potential long-term relationship. So that is one route in terms of regulatory mechanisms making more conducive for a longer-term partnership between the farmers and rest of the value chain. The other piece is, since I'm talking about digital, making available the entire data that is with the government in terms of the farmer records, the soil health cards which have been created, the land record data, so that your personalization efforts of farm advisory can ride on some of the existing data that is already available, which is commonly accessible to every provider. Government can certainly cost it on a commercial basis. And people would all, instead of reinventing this basic data and everybody trying to gather this, focus on the solutions which will be adding value to the farmer, riding on this core infrastructure that is made available as data. And that is the other role that government can certainly play.
I have probably one of my last questions to you, which is, I call it as a little tricky. When I say tricky, consumer wants all this we mentioned, quality, variety, nutrition, taste, and everything at a convenient price or an affordable price. Whereas when we go to the farmer, there is a cost to produce all those things. So how do we balance it? I mean, the farmer gets his remuneration or the best value for his productivity, and the consumer gets the value for his money in his terms, that yes, I paid X amount of money, I'm getting X plus out of that. So how do you balance in both those things, the consumer versus the farmer?
Yeah, I think that is the fundamental approach for any demand-driven production. If you are producing what the consumer wants, I think that is when you will be able to charge an appropriate price. So value for money equation becomes far more relevant if you are offering. There is a premium that can be charged for that. If you are offering a convenience, a premium can be charged for that. If you are only bringing run-of-the-mill product, then obviously consumer is looking for lower price and it becomes a commodity. And that's why the whole value chain needs to be aligned and a fair value must go back to the farmer. So if you are looking at, let's say, a potato as a product, so there are different kinds of products which are made with potato, and there is also a table consumption at homes for potatoes. So if you look at the relative prices of the table potato is far more volatile. But what is going into making chips, or what is going into making French fries, what is going into making other products which are processed, you need to create more solid content, less defects, better traceability for all the other kind of concern that the consumer has. So if you shift to that kind of a production which is in need and increasing need, then you can certainly have a potential price premium for that, and with a far lower level of volatility, because that demand is available to you. And these are also the contexts in which one could look at different kinds of farming agreements. And that is also something that is part of a recent reforms. That is also something put in place. Another way of really converting this potentially a zero-sum game of balancing between a consumer and the farmer is by relying on the derivative markets. In those commodities where derivatives are possible, at the time of planting, you can buy an option, or you can fix futures whenever you like. So I think some of that, again, individual farmers may not be able to participate, because quite often it is a complex subject. And that is where aggregating through FPOs or through the digital platforms, it is possible to put. So therefore, the price at which a farmer is selling need not be the price at which a processor or a retailer is buying. Both can fix their price at different points of time on a derivative market. And that's how, in fact, most parts of the world trades. I think sooner than later, India also can get there. Our own derivative markets are just evolving. Government has reformed even more by bringing options that devolve on the goods, and options which have been put on the futures market, I think also need to get deepened for many of these products. So for specialty products, you produce what the consumer wants, you're likely to get more. And for commodity kind of products, you rely on derivative markets is another means of balancing. Then, of course, in addition to just price-based equation, in this whole alignment of value chain and some of the farmer-centric example that I gave, the effort is also in terms of improving productivity, because better knowledge would mean higher productivity. So you may have a lower unit price, but better net income. Then, of course, the third piece is also into lower cost of cultivation, because right now we still have various market distorting subsidies, be it in terms of fertilizer, be it in terms of water and power and some of these things. But over a period of time, some of these things will get corrected, and it is likely that some of them will move in as pre-farm cash subsidy, direct benefit transfer, which seem to be gaining popular kind of support both from the farmers as well as from the various governments and political parties. So when that happens, so farmer is better off by reducing costs of many of these, be it in terms of, and water, of course, not only in terms of cost implication, as also sustainability implication. So I think cost reduction is the other ways. So all the multiple modes used to be used to make the whole farming remunerative and get a higher net income, despite the consumer's interest of buying something at a lower price, which is natural.
I think, yeah, cost of cultivation makes a huge difference, especially from Indian context, not only from subsidies and all. There's a lot of, I won't say wrongly advised, but excess usage or unrequired usage of a lot of agri inputs. So that probably will be getting into the efficient mode. Now, I request attendees or the audience, if you have some questions, please raise your hands. Though we have some questions in the box, but I will allow you to speak to Mr. Siva Kumar with a very specific question. If anyone has got questions, please raise your hand. So we'll take the questions. I saw hands going up in the beginning. If people are still interested, you can put a question. Yes. Ankur, would you like to speak, Ankur? Yeah, we have Santosh Jha. Hi, Santosh, you can unmute and introduce yourself.
Thank you very much for this wonderful webinar. Actually, I've been watching your webinar very frequently, and I really appreciate that. We are not from the agriculture background. The problem is that's why we want to learn as much as we can from the experienced people like you and Dr. Siva Kumar. We have met in some of the exhibitions and seminars. Got some time to talk to him also. So I was very excited to see this webinar and listen to him. I have some question. We are basically from the makers background. I mean, we can make devices, we can make systems to monitor it, to control it, automate it. We are from that background, having experience of 25 years in different industries, from the automotive to the industrial, defense, everything. For the last 5 years, we are into that. I just wanted to understand the way we should approach to this industry, the the farming industry. What we are struggling is, we started thinking, Googling first. Since we are not from the agriculture background, we started thinking, what is the real problem? And it is the Google who helped us. And instead of going to the farmer, we went to the Google and tried to find out what is the problem. Understood that, probably it is the agriculture, how to find out the, real, the appropriate amount of, the watering and all those things, the automation and the, so those kind of thought that this is the problem. When we made that, went to the farmer, they said, yeah, it is okay, but nobody bought it, so then we realized, it is not their immediate problem probably. And then we started asking them what is their problem. Then we understood for the bigger farmer, it is the pump control and all those things. So what I'm becoming a little, more taking time, but the question here is, do you have any specific advice for us, like people who can make the things, and you think, to help the masses, to make them profitable? What are the few things you think, we should focus in and we should approach to the farming community?
Yeah, so I can talk about two different kinds of opportunities which are emerging for the kind of boxes and systems, and especially if you are able to integrate more sensors and other components into it. One is to do with the precision farming. You did mention some of that in terms of water. So any guidance to the farmer to lower the cost of production by more precisely using the inputs would be a major area that is expanded. So obviously, depending on which geographies you are more familiar with, you need to spend more time talking to the farmers around to see what is their more immediate problem in terms of higher cost they are incurring, which is without necessarily the kind of a result. And therefore, how can you provide guidance to measuring something and then offering what consumption can be lowered. It may be to do with moisture, or it may be to do with the chemistry. That is one set. The other kind of opportunity is in rapid quality assessment, because most of the quality assessment along the chain happens on a physical observation basis at this point of time. So some of the newer technologies are enabling rapid quality testing at a relatively low cost, and these equipment can be deployed anywhere along the chain, and that is the other space which is expanding in terms of number of experiments that are happening. So there are spaces like these that you can see, depending on where your strengths are, be able to align with these kind of opportunities and build newer businesses.
Thanks, Santosh. I will take a question from Pulkit. Yeah, Pulkit, introduce yourself and you can put a question.
Hello, am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Greetings, Mr. Shiv Kumar and Mr. Raj. I'm Pulkit. I'm from Seedworks, and I was also associated with ITC previous to Seedworks. So my question is around hybrid seed itself. So this year, as we all know, that hybrid rice seed production has seen almost a deviation of 20 to 30% across the industry in the seed production. So I just wanted to understand and have your 2 cents on how technology can be utilized in better prediction of seed production supplies, as you know the go-to-market timelines are very short in terms of the hybrid seed majorly. So that's my question. Thank you.
So basically, in terms of technologies are twofold. One is directly asking the farmer and keeping track, because the planting intention firstly is broad as to what a farmer would like to plant. And as the period comes closer, there is different decisions across multiple choices keeps narrowed down. Finally, one decision is taken as to what gets planted. So therefore, what is the planting intention by different kinds of crops or varieties is a constant monitoring. That is one side of information that would be useful. And it can be syndicated effort. It can be your standalone effort with appropriate stratified sampling as to where the demand is moving. The final decision may happen very quickly, but the thinking process evolves. So even if you have a few hundred sample directly, you could do it, or you can outsource to several agencies who are in the data business to have much larger sample, more scientific, to arrive at what is the narrowing down of different choices. The other is monitoring the external weather, and then based on the historical data, as the weather patterns change, what is happening to both the production of various crops and the planting decisions as the other stream of data. I think the whole analytics space can be used there. So if these two are used as the roots, I think you'll be having better predictability. Anything to do with future obviously comes with its own uncertainty, but this triangulation will certainly help you with better predictability.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Rajeshwari, will you please introduce yourself and speak? We'll take 2 more questions. Rajeshwari, unmute. Madam, you need to unmute. Can you please unmute? Okay, I think some issue. I will go to Ankur. Ankur Raj. Can you please unmute and speak, Ankur?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, Ankur.
Yeah, good evening, and thanks to both of you for organizing for such a wonderful talk. And Mr. Shiv Kumar, thank you for coming and giving us some wonderful advice. So I am Ankur Raj. I am from Rabobank. I work in various places in Tara, in Amul, with the Nielsen, the Coromandel, and UPL. A lot of different agricultural companies. One thing I was looking at, there is a lot of influence of biotechnology, the way it is going to shape the entire food and agriculture in future. So what do you feel? Means I heard somewhere the thing is your entire cropping land will come down because of agriculture, the uses of biotechnology. Let us say whether it is production of crops or meat production or anything. Do you envisage such a thing for India in future?
That is potentially very long-term prospect, but not in the near future that one could anticipate significant scaling down of the acreage arising out of biotechnology, because many of these come with their own risk-reward assessments that government will have to consider and establish before the large-scale migration happens. And so certainly I think many of them hold promise, and some developments in this space will certainly be required in order to deal with the scarcity of the resources like land, topsoil, water, and also to deal with climate change and potentially some level of production that may be done inside climate change. Many of these require biotechnology of various kinds. There were concerns with certain technology, and therefore the scientific world has invented technologies which are relatively more acceptable. So I think it's an ongoing journey. The world has always invented newer technologies to deal with expanding population and rising consumption. So I think once more that will happen. But I think my own intuition at this time, on the basis of whatever available data also, is that that kind of a rapid reduction in the land required is unlikely to happen in the near future as in 30, 40 years kind of a time frame. And beyond that, it is anybody's guess.
Thanks, Ankur. I will
Okay, thank
take
you.
last. Yeah, thanks. I will take last one question because Mr. Siva Kumar has got a quick another meeting with his thing. Can we take? Yeah, can we? Datta, can you introduce yourself and speak? Devopam Datta.
Good evening, gentlemen. I am Devopam Datta. Okay. First of all, thank you for having taking time out and discussing with us. It's been lovely hearing you and getting a perspective. I am a part of an organization called AGI Miltech. We are an organization into post-harvest equipments for agri processing or grain processing, so to say. In the year or so gone by, we've made headway into millets processing that has kind of caught on. I would like to understand from Siva Kumarji your perspective about the entire millets value chain from the perspective of the present consumption pattern, or also in the context of the COVID situation in India.
Yeah, I mean, certainly millets hold great promise because of the nutritive properties of millets. I think it's about 40, 50 years back from consumption of millets, India has moved to consumption of other cereals, largely promoted by government and also considering that more refined the better. But I think that is now coming a full circle. The millets are gaining attention now. So at one level, millets are still either at the very niche end that very health conscious, wellness conscious consumers are taking at one end, or it is seen as poor man's food at the other. But I think it will gain much larger scale and value for the whole chain when the larger segment of the population, other than these two outliers, start consuming also. And it does hold promise given its rich protein content and other nutritive properties which are there. And certainly post-harvest has a role to play in that in terms of proper taste and edible properties and all of that to come in. But what also needs to happen to make it attractive in terms of incomes as well as prices to get this popular end of consumption is much more enhancement in productivity, because much of the hybridization and the research efforts are bypassed this millets. There are certainly some newer strains, and we have ICRISAT very much in Hyderabad, which has done some great work in this space. And I think as the productivity also gets enhanced, we will see a good future for this. I certainly see this as a very attractive segment in the coming days.
Thank you, sir.
I think that's it, sir, with the questions.
Thank you.
Would you like to take one or two questions more if time permits?
What are the time now?
It's 5:05.
Yep. There are maybe another couple of questions at the most.
Yeah, okay. I'll quickly go to Murli Krishna. Murli, can you unmute and speak, please? Are you there? Okay. Adarsh? Adarsh? Yes. Can you introduce yourself and be very precise with the question? Hello? Rajeshwari? Are you there? You raised your hand again. I think, oh, okay, they're unable to connect with you. So thank you so much for the insight. I think,
Nice.
yeah, we saw a lot of, already chats being poured in that, this is one of the best informative sessions for most of them. You have taken your time in, huge, hectic, I won't say schedule because your schedule is always tight, but when I was a child in school, I heard, busy man always has time. I think you are the best example for that. You take out time for all the things what is required. Friends, thank you so much for joining. And as usual, this show is successful and is happening because of the regular loyal audience and attendees which pour in large numbers. And some of you who have some commitments, and who couldn't watch the full episode, please. You can visit. We have uploaded all our previous webinars, and Mr. Siva Kumar's talk also will be uploaded in next couple of days in our youtube.com/rayconsulting. So please visit. If you please like it, forward it, and subscribe to the channel so you'll get updates. As I said, we are also update and post it on Facebook and LinkedIn pages. That is Ray Consulting, all the recordings, and we always share our information of webinars and other details what is happening from Ray Consulting through these pages. So please keep visiting these pages from Facebook and LinkedIn so you'll get updates from Ray Consulting. We have next 3 weeks again blocked, and you are going to have outstanding speakers coming in. Next Saturday, I have Paul Wattier, who's a technical director, knowledge director for Grow Asia, talking to me from Melbourne, Australia. Then on 18th, we have stalwarts from micro irrigation talking to me, and then post that we'll have a discussion on nutrition and agriculture. So with so much lined up, you can look forward to hear from us, listen to us, and then please give your thoughts on how do we further improve this series. And if you have some choice, of course, we are trying to connect the best, like Mr. Siva Kumar. If you have some choice of speakers you would like to listen, would like to us to bring on board, please feel free to suggest the names with their details too, so that we'll approach and bring them for the benefit of agriculture in the country and the world. And as I said, if someone is keen to sponsor this series, please feel free, because we would like to make it much stronger. We are trying, besides YouTube, we are also trying to make it as a podcast through Spotify or Apple or stuff like that. So thank you so much. Thanks everybody. Just before we close, I would like to play the message from Venkat once again. Pulkit, if you're still there, I congratulate Seedworks. Please convey my message in person to the entire team for getting the best HR company to work for.
Good day and greetings from Seedworks. My name is Vasantawada Venkatram. I work as CEO for Seedworks International Private Limited, based out of Hyderabad, India. Seedworks' vision is to provide superior seed solutions by harnessing technologies and innovation to create value for all stakeholders in a sustainable manner. At Seedworks, we are committed to enhance the livelihood of the farming community by closely working with public, private, and civil society to meet the national goal of doubling up the farmers' income. The introduction of Agriculture 4.0 has paved the way for a new space in agriculture, which we now call as the agri-tech sector. Companies use the latest and emerging technologies in the agri sector as an engine for sustainable growth. At Seedworks, being a life science and technology company, we are focusing on digitization and innovation as levers to meet the social, environmental, and the economic growth of the seed ecosystem.
So thank you. Please take care. Things are not safe. Please, all the audience, take care and then educate others also to be safe. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you. Bye-bye.